In 1940, a brilliant mind saved millions of lives by solving one of medicine's deadliest problems. Hospitals worldwide still use this breakthrough every single day. But for decades, the history books told a different story, giving credit to someone else entirely. This is the truth they didn't want you to know. Every day, somewhere in the world, someone receives a blood transfusion that saves their life. A car accident victim, a mother during childbirth, a cancer patient fighting for one more day. These transfusions happen thousands of times daily, and we barely think about them anymore. They're routine, expected. Simple. But they weren't always. There was a time when storing blood was impossible. When soldiers bled out on battlefields not because medicine couldn't help them, but because the life-saving blood they needed couldn't reach them in time. There was a time when one of humanity's deadliest enemies wasn't disease or injury. It was time itself. And then, one person changed everything. This is a story about genius, about persistence, about a discovery so revolutionary that it reshaped modern medicine forever. But it's also a story about theft, about a system so broken that it could take credit from the person who earned it and hand it to someone who simply had the right skin color. If this story makes you angry, makes you think, or opens your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and share this video. These hidden stories need to be told, and you can help make sure they reach millions. Now, let's dive into a story that will change how you see medical history forever. Picture 1940. The world is at war, and young men are dying by the thousands. But here's what most people don't know. Many of them aren't dying from their wounds. They're dying from something called shock, a catastrophic drop in blood pressure that happens when the body loses too much blood. Medics on the battlefield know exactly what these soldiers need. They need blood transfusions. They need it fast. But there's one massive problem that no one has solved. Blood dies. Outside the human body, blood breaks down quickly. It spoils like milk left out in the sun. Hospitals in 1940 couldn't store it for more than a few days, and even then, it was risky. Blood banks didn't really exist in any meaningful way. If you needed blood, someone with your blood type had to be right there, right then, ready to donate directly to you. Imagine that. Imagine bleeding out in a hospital, while nurses frantically searched for a matching donor who might not even exist in that building. For surgeons, this was a nightmare. For military commanders, it was a crisis. Thousands of soldiers were dying, not because medicine couldn't save them, but because medicine couldn't reach them. The race was on to solve this problem, and whoever cracked it would change medicine forever. But in 1940s America, there was another problem running parallel to this medical crisis. Segregation wasn't just about water fountains and bus seats. It infected everything, including science itself. Black doctors weren't allowed to treat white patients in most hospitals. Black researchers worked in basement laboratories with leftover equipment. And black scientists, no matter how brilliant, were expected to stay in their place, silent, invisible, grateful for whatever scraps of opportunity they received. This is the world that Dr. Theodore Williams walked into. And despite everything designed to stop him, he would change it forever. Theodore Williams was born in rural Alabama in 1904 into a world that told him from day one that he didn't matter. His parents were sharecroppers, barely scraping by in a system designed to keep them poor. But his mother noticed something special about young Theodore. While other kids played, he collected insects and examined them for hours. He asked questions constantly about why plants grew, why people got sick, why the sky changed colors. His father saved every penny he could spare for Theodore's education. Not because he was wealthy, but because he believed his son had something the world needed to see. Theodore attended a segregated school with hand-me-down textbooks and no laboratory equipment. While white schools across town had microscopes and chemistry sets, Theodore's school barely had chalk. But he didn't let that stop him. He built his own tools. He studied by candlelight. He memorized every science book he could get his hands on. When Theodore told his teacher he wanted to be a doctor, she didn't laugh. She looked him straight in the eye and said something he never forgot. "You'll have to be 10 times better than them just to be considered half as good. Can you do that?" Theodore said yes. He had no idea how right she was, or how painful that truth would become. Getting into college was the first mountain to climb. Most universities simply didn't accept black students. The few that did had quotas, 1 or 2 per year, if that Theodore applied to 17 schools. 16 rejected him without even looking at his grades. The 17th, a small medical college in the north, took a chance. They gave him a scholarship. But there was a catch. He had to maintain perfect grades. 1B, and he was out. Theodore arrived on campus and realized he was the only black face in a sea of white students. They stared at him in the hallways. Some refused to sit next to him. Professors questioned whether he really belonged there, but Theodore had made a promise to his father, to his mother, to himself. He studied 20 hours a day. He aced every exam. He graduated top of his class, and still, hospitals wouldn't hire him. After medical school, Theodore finally found work at a colored hospital on the edge of town. It was understaffed, underfunded, and overflowing with patients who had nowhere else to go. White hospitals turned black patients away, so they all ended up here. Theodore worked in conditions that would horrify modern doctors: outdated equipment, medicine shortages, no support staff. But he learned something crucial in those years. He learned that blood was the key to everything. Patients died on his operating table not because he wasn't skilled enough, but because he ran out of blood. Women died in childbirth because there wasn't enough blood available. Accident victims died waiting for donors who never came. It haunted him. Every single preventable death carved itself into his memory. And Theodore became obsessed with one question: how do you keep blood alive outside the body? The medical establishment had already been working on this problem for years with little success. Blood stored for more than a few days would clot, separate, or become toxic. Some scientists tried adding chemicals, but that made the blood unusable. Others tried refrigeration with mixed results. The challenge wasn't just keeping blood fresh, it was keeping it safe, effective, and ready to use at a moment's notice. Theodore started experimenting in a basement laboratory at the colored hospital. He worked with whatever supplies he could find or afford with his own money. While white researchers at major universities had teams and funding, Theodore worked alone at night after 12-hour shifts. He tested different preservation methods, different storage temperatures, different containers. Most experiments failed. But failure taught him what didn't work, and slowly he started to understand what might. He discovered that blood could be separated into components: red blood cells, plasma, platelets. Each part behaved differently. And plasma, the liquid portion of blood, could be stored much longer than whole blood. It could be dried, preserved, and reconstituted when needed. More importantly, plasma didn't require blood type matching the way whole blood did. Anyone could receive it. This was the breakthrough medicine had been waiting for. Theodore spent 3 more years perfecting his technique. He developed a method to extract, preserve, and store plasma that could last for months instead of days. He tested it carefully, documenting every result. The data was undeniable. This worked. This could save thousands of lives. Theodore published his findings in a small medical journal. Barely noticed by the establishment, he thought his work would speak for itself. He had no idea what was coming. A white doctor named Dr. Preston Hayes worked at a prestigious hospital downtown. He had reputation, connections, and the ear of military officials desperate for a blood storage solution. Somehow, Hayes got his hands on Theodore's research. Maybe someone showed it to him. Maybe he attended a conference where Theodore presented. The exact moment doesn't matter. What matters is what Hayes did next. Hayes took Theodore's method, replicated it in his well-funded laboratory, and published it as his own discovery. He didn't steal the idea word for word. He was too smart for that. He made small modifications, changed the language, and presented it to the military as a revolutionary new technique he had pioneered. And because Hayes was white, respected, and connected, everyone believed him. No one questioned it. No one checked. Theodore found out when he read Hayes's paper in a major medical journal. His hands shook as he read his own discovery described with different words. Credited to someone else, he felt sick. He felt angry. But most of all, he felt powerless. What could he do? He was a black doctor at a colored hospital with no reputation outside his community. Hayes was a celebrated physician at a major research institution. Theodore tried to speak up. He wrote letters to medical journals explaining that he had published this method first. He contacted colleagues, hoping someone would listen. A few believed him. Most didn't. And the ones who did believe him were too afraid to say anything publicly. Going up against someone like Preston Hayes could destroy a career. Theodore learned a brutal lesson. Truth doesn't matter if no one with power wants to hear it. Meanwhile, Hayes became famous. The military adopted his blood plasma storage method and credited him with saving thousands of soldiers' lives. Hayes gave lectures at medical schools. He received awards and honors. He appeared in newspapers as a medical hero. And Theodore watched all of this happen from his basement laboratory, knowing that every life saved by that technique was saved because of work he had done, work that no one would ever credit him for. The theft wasn't just professional. It was personal. It was a reminder that no matter how brilliant Theodore was, no matter how hard he worked, the system would never see him as equal. His work could be used, but his name could not. His intelligence could be exploited, but never celebrated. This is what racism in science looked like, not burning crosses and hate speech, but quiet theft in medical journals, polite erasure in history books. Preston Hayes built an entire career on Theodore's work. He became known as the father of modern blood banking. Medical students learned his name in their textbooks. Hospitals named wings after him. Universities gave him honorary degrees. And everywhere he went, Hayes told the same story, how he had worked tirelessly to develop this life-saving technique, how he had overcome countless obstacles, how his genius had saved millions. Theodore continued working at the colored hospital, saving lives in obscurity. He trained younger black doctors, knowing they would face the same barriers he had. He continued his research, making additional discoveries that would also be credited to others. And he carried the weight of injustice every single day, knowing that history was being written wrong and there was nothing he could do about it. The irony was painful and obvious. Theodore's discovery was being used to save lives without discrimination. White soldiers and black soldiers both benefited from the blood plasma storage technique. Yet the blood banks themselves were often segregated. Blood from black donors was labeled and stored separately from white donors' blood, as if racism could somehow infect the bloodstream. The military used Theodore's science while refusing to acknowledge him. They saved lives with his method, while maintaining the fiction that people like him were inferior decades past. Hayes died in 1968, celebrated and mourned as a medical pioneer. Obituaries praised his contributions to medicine. His funeral was attended by hundreds of distinguished colleagues. Theodore read about Hayes's death in the newspaper and felt nothing, just emptiness. The man who had stolen his life's work was now permanently cemented in history as a hero, while Theodore remained unknown. But truth has a way of surviving, even when it's buried. In the 1990s, a medical historian researching blood banking history started noticing something strange. The dates didn't quite line up. Hayes's published paper came after a smaller publication by someone named Theodore Williams. The historian dug deeper. She found Theodore's original laboratory notebooks, donated to a small archive after his death in 1979. She found letters Theodore had written to colleagues. She found testimony from doctors who had worked with him. The evidence was overwhelming. Theodore Williams had developed the blood plasma storage method. First, Hayes had taken it and claimed it as his own. The historian published her findings, and slowly, painfully, the medical community began to reckon with what had happened. Some were shocked. Many were defensive. A few claimed it didn't matter who got credit. But the truth was out there now, and it couldn't be buried again. Major medical institutions began acknowledging Theodore Williams's contribution. His name started appearing in updated textbooks alongside Hayes's, sometimes before Hayes's awards, and honors came posthumously, decades too late for Theodore to receive them himself. His children and grandchildren attended ceremonies where their father and grandfather was finally recognized for what he had done. It was bittersweet. Justice delayed by half a century. But this raises an uncomfortable question. How many other Theodore Williams are out there? How many brilliant minds contributed discoveries that were stolen, erased, or ignored because of their race, their gender, their background? How many names should we know that we don't? Medical history is full of these ghosts, these invisible pioneers whose work changed the world, but whose names were deliberately forgotten. Theodore Williams saved millions of lives. Every person who has received a blood transfusion in the last 80 years owes something to his work. Every blood bank in every hospital operates on principles he helped establish. His contribution to medicine is immeasurable. And for most of history, he got nothing for it. This isn't just about one man being treated unfairly. It's about a system that was designed to extract value from certain people while denying them recognition. It's about how racism doesn't just hurt individuals. It distorts truth itself. And it's about how we today have a responsibility to correct these historical wrongs. Theodore's story should make us angry, but it should also make us vigilant. These patterns still exist. Researchers from marginalized communities still fight for credit. Their work is still sometimes appropriated by those with more power and privilege. The methods have evolved, but the underlying dynamics haven't disappeared. We have to actively fight against this. We have to check our sources, question our histories, and make sure that credit goes where it truly belongs. Every time someone receives blood plasma in an emergency room, Theodore Williams is there. His genius flows through those transfusion tubes. His persistence lives on in every life saved. And now, finally, his name is being remembered, not just as a footnote, but as a pioneer who changed medicine forever. Despite a system designed to stop him, Theodore Williams died in 1979 at the age of 75. He never received major recognition during his lifetime. He never got to stand on a stage and accept the awards he deserved. He never saw his name in textbooks or medical journals the way Preston Hayes did. But he knew what he had done. He knew he had saved lives. And perhaps, in the end, that knowledge was enough to keep him going. His children remember him as a quiet man who worked constantly and never complained. His colleagues remember him as brilliant, patient, and impossibly skilled. And now, the world is finally starting to remember him as what he truly was: a revolutionary scientist who solved one of medicine's greatest challenges and changed history forever. This story probably made you feel something: anger, sadness, maybe even hope. Don't let that feeling fade. Hit the like button if you believe this story matters. Subscribe so you never miss when we uncover more hidden history. But most importantly, share this video. Tag someone who needs to hear this truth. Comment below with the name of another forgotten pioneer you think we should cover next. Together, we can make sure no more brilliant minds are erased from history. The algorithm won't promote truth unless you do. So what are you waiting for? Let's make sure this story reaches everyone who needs to hear it. Theodore Williams deserves to be remembered. And now, because of you watching and sharing this story, he will be.